Hello and welcome to the Game Lore Archives. Today we're going to be talking about the Nords. The Nords are a race of men whose home is Skyrim. The cold, harsh mountains have forged the Nords into a fierce warrior race who pride themselves on their skill at arms
and the ability to drink.
They are on the hunt for glory and in death passage to Sovngarde, a place that they can get drunk for all of eternity. Thanks to Skyrim, we've been given a deep insight into the Nordic culture and all of its interesting aspects. They are basically Vikings and Northern Europeans mixed together. Their buildings are made from wood and stone, and they appear to be pretty nifty builders in their own right. Forts pepper the landscape of Skyrim, and wooden huts nestle in the valleys. In every inn there's a bard, as Nords love to sing, eat, drink, and brag about their heroic deeds.
And this is what their afterlife is, a large drinking hall in Sovngarde.
Here their spirits can spend eternity doing the things Nords hold dearest, and such almost every Nord wants their spirit to go there.
The Nords' religion is quite straightforward. It is very similar to the Alessian pantheon, but see Talos as a god and believe Alduin and Akatosh are separate. This is because they think, why would Akatosh, the creator of time, be the same as Alduin, who represents the end of time?
It's a fair question, I suppose.
One of the other important beliefs in Nordic religion is how Lorcan fits in. He is called Shor by the Nords, and many people can be heard saying things like, by Shor's beard. He is one of the chief deities for the Nords, and they believe the elven gods killed him on the Red Mountain in the Dawn era. As a direct consequence, Kinnereth's rage created storms and rain to wash over Skyrim. She was upset because Kinnereth and Shor were said to be partners. Shor is held in such high regard because he fought with and protected the old Elnefae, and he protected them again and again in the Dawn era. As the creator of the world and protector of the Nord ancestors, he is venerated as a hero.
And to be fair, it's pretty hard to argue with that. It's pretty hard to argue with that. There are groups of Nords who have different beliefs to the rest of Skyrim. One such group of awkward sods are the Skrull of Solstheim. Rather than the standard Nord pantheon, they venerate nature, not nudism. Northern Skyrim's really not the place for that. But actual nature.
Might be a bit cold.
Yeah, maybe a bit nippy. It seems to reflect their religion from before they became Nord, and the creatures were their deities. They credit the creation of everything to nature to the Allmaker, who's more like the Christian god, and the balance of power gives them their shamanistic powers. Interestingly, Lorcan is actually an evil figure in the Skrull religion, and is portrayed as a demon. This, of course, is completely at odds with the main Nordic religion. In spite of this, Lorcan is not the biggest evil the Skrull face. They consider Padme to fill this role. You may think this would be a title given to the Daedric Princes, but they're not worshipped by the Skrull, they're just acknowledged.
Just like we acknowledge farts. They blight our everyday life, but we sure as hell don't worship them. So, the history of the Nords goes all the way back to the Merithic era, before they were the Nords of Skyrim. They were originally known as the Atmorans of Atmora, because we're always really, really creative with their names in this game. Not a lot of information is known about Atmora, aside from some scraps. It is believed life was harsh and cold and very dangerous, and what drove the majority of Atmorans across seemed to be some sort of civil war.
To be honest, they were probably just fighting to stay warm.
And went to Skyrim.
And then decided to go to Skyrim.
Atmorans have been coming to Tamriel for years, and lived peacefully in the north for many, many years. Ysgramor, hearing the grass is greener...
Or, more accurately, the land is less full of death.
He gathered all that would follow him, and sailed to Tamriel. This bulked out the population, and it became quite sizable. The elves that were already in Tamriel, specifically the snow elves, who lived among the snow-topped hills in the snowy northern reaches of Skyrim, lived harmoniously with the humans. However, something caused the snow elves to commit mass genocide on the humans. We aren't 100% sure why they did this. Obviously, we did discuss it in depth last episode. Some people felt they were threatened by the numbers and tried to cull them. Others believe it has something to do with what the Nords had uncovered, or yet something more sinister still.
So this will only ever be conjecture, as after the Night of Tears, which is when the Snow Elves made their move, Ysgramor eradicated the Snow Elves in return. How this played out was after the Night of Tears, Ysgramor and his sons fled back to Atmora as the only survivors. He raised an army and came back with 500 companions to take his revenge. Ysgramor's companions stormed through Skyrim, killing every Snow Elf they found. Eventually they were driven all the way back to Solstheim. Here the companions killed the last of the main forces of elves. A few isolated and scattered elves did manage to survive, but they would forever be persecuted and unable to re-establish their race. It's also reported that the Snow Elf prince was killed by a 12-year-old girl called Fina. The story goes, the prince killed the girl's mother in front of her, and in her rage she picked up her mother's sword and hurled it at him. The sword pierced the Snow Elf's prince and knocked him off his horse and killed him there and then.
Serves him right for being a jerk.
As a result, the elves were then defeated. Actually, in this instance, it was beyond defeat. They were utterly decimated.
In the 113th year of the First Era, King Harold was the first to unify Skyrim, and 30 years later pushed the last known elves out of Skyrim. His son continued his expansion of Skyrim into Morrowind, High Rock, and the northern reaches of Cyrodiil. This huge expansion unravelled under King Borgus, although not entirely his fault. While travelling through Cyrodiil, he unfortunately met with a wild hunt, which we discussed in the Bosmer episode. The Moot, which is the council that decides on the next High King,
and is the most indecisive group of people in all of Tamriel,
were unable to pick a new king. Without leadership, the provinces outside of Skyrim were lost.
Smooth, guys. Well done.
GG.
GG. The reason for this is that Skyrim was plunged into a 50-year civil war where various people scrapped to be the next High King. This infighting only finished when Olaf One-Eye,
a mortal who made up for his lack of vision with extra-large cojones,
he captured the dragon Numenix, and do you know what? No one wanted to argue with him. Due to the Moot's monumental mess-up, an agreement called the Pact of Chieftains was drawn up, which meant that the Moot would only convene if there was no legitimate successors.
Late into the First Era, the Akaviri invaded from Akavir, again another very exciting name. They carved a path through Skyrim after defeating the Nords. Only when Raymond Cyrodiil interrupted at the Battle of Pale Pass were the invaders sent packing. The remaining Akaviri swore loyalty to Riemann. This had a surprising effect on Tamriel. At the beginning of the Second Era, the Nords were locked in conflict again. It's almost as if they enjoy fighting. This time it was against the Reachmen of High Rock. Hajolt Earlybeard led the fight against them, but soon allied himself with the Colavian king, Chulakash.
I think it's Kulakane?
Kulakash. With their joint forces, they forced the Reachmen into the impenetrable fortress of Old Heroldrun. Hajolt was taught the way of the voice and shouted down the gates, and so defeated the Reachmen. It was upon this victory that he would be called Talos. Like the Emperor and Darth Vader, Chulakane and Talos worked to create their own empire. There was, however, an aligned force made up of mostly Bretons and Nords. The Nords, after seeing his power, turned to the dark side. Joined the Empire. This in turn meant that Skyrim became part of the Empire as well.
Throughout the Third Era, Skyrim was relatively stable, probably due to the fact that the majority of their forces were being used to expand and stabilise the Empire. So there was no trouble in Skyrim because fighting was going on elsewhere. To be fair, it was not completely peaceful. Solitude did get caught up in a war of the Red Diamond, which was a tussle in the Septim family as they fought for power. This only ended when Pontimus Septim was killed and there was a degree of peace. Near the end of the Third Era, Jagathon, an ambitious and devious man, was one of the Emperor's battle mages. He banished and posed as Uriel Septim VII. He then posed as the Emperor, and under the false Emperor's rule, tensions boiled and many places descended into war. During this time, Skyrim made maneuvers to take back some of the land that Skyrim had taken and lost back in the First Era.
The Oblivion Crisis marked the end of the Third Era. Throughout, the Nords of Skyrim remained relatively unaffected. In fact, a lot of Nords managed to make a profit from the Daedric invasions. In spite of this, the after effects of the Daedric invasion would be felt most heavily in Skyrim. With the Empire recuperating themselves, the Aldmeri Dominion waged war on the weakened Empire. They were defeated, and the Emperor was forced to sign the White Gold Concordat. Various terms of peace were outlined in the agreement, but 2 of those affected the Nords. The Blades were disbanded, which allowed the Thalmor to travel freely into Skyrim, and the worship of Talis was banned as well. Due to those terms, many Nords wanted to break away from the Empire. As all of this boiled below the surface, Ulfric Stormcloak killed the High King of Skyrim, starting the Stormcloak Rebellion and giving the Nords just another thing to fight for. And this, of course, puts us squarely up to Elder Scrolls Skyrim game. What's your opinion on the Nordic, the Skyrim Civil War? Whose side are you on?
So, I always was on the side of the Stormcloaks to begin with, because I was like, the Empire invading someone else's homeland, it's not fair, so on and so forth. And then after sort of reading into it, I'm actually on the Empire side, because I can't help but think, I always think, well, the Empire brought stability, profitability, so on and so forth, and all the Nords had to do was just not worship Talos outside.
So yeah, even from when I first started it, I was kind of on the Empire's side. If I feel for the Nords that they can't worship who they want to worship, and obviously that's always going to create tension. However, there is a bit of dialogue in the game. I can't even remember who says it. But basically they were turning a blind eye on any worship at home because they understood that the Skyrims wanted to worship it, and obviously the Empire only signed the thing exclusively to stop deaths. Everyone would die unless we sign this. But, we take pity on the Nords. We know that we don't want you to stop it. Just do it in quiet. And then the Nords kept up such a big fuss of it, and that's why the elves travelled to Skyrim. And while the elves are in Skyrim, they then have to keep such a...
And the other thing as well is, how can they expect to overthrow the Aldmeri Dominion if the Empire's allies aren't working together?
Yeah. So I do agree with the Empire on this one. But what do you guys think? Whose side you are on and why? Please, let us know in the comments how you feel about it.
Indeed.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks with Khajiit episode. So thanks ever so much for watching. See you then.
Sweet.